And today's 13th session on grief and bereavement literacy is titled Disenfranchised Loss, Addressing the Needs of Pet Loss Grief. And so I'm going to introduce our presenters. So we have Pam Bilusack, who is the Executive Director in the BC Bereavement Helpline. And Pam initially joined the BC Bereavement Helpline as a traumatic loss support group facilitator. And then that role that also ultimately actually led her to her current position as the executive director. And she poses an extensive background in the nonprofit sector and holds a human resources management certificate from Saskatchewan Polytechnic, as well as an applied psychology and counseling diploma from the Kelowna College of Professional Counseling. Despite having experienced many significant losses in her life, Pam's personal connection to both suicide and pet loss has really driven her deep commitment to supporting individuals affected by disenfranchised losses. And Pam has been actively engaged in the suicide prevention and post-vention community for several years, and previously serving as the executive board member at the Crisis Center of BC. And she continues her work as an active member of their Bereavement Advisory Committee. So while her primary responsibility is leading the BC Bereavement Helpline as the executive director, Pam still facilitates support groups as she deeply values the opportunity to provide direct support to those navigating their grief. And so Pam, thank you for being here with us today. I know that you've done another presentation, and so it's always nice for you to come back on and share more about your knowledge and your love for animals. I know that's one of those conversations we typically have. And so additionally, we have Paris here with us, who will be speaking about the lived experience of pet loss. And so hand over the session to Pam.
Thanks so much, Joshua. So I want to personally thank you and BC Center for Palliative Care for having me back again. I know you and I share this passion for pet loss support. You're an advocate not only for BCBH, but definitely far and beyond, including the unhoused. And I just want to thank everybody else who's joining today. So as you'll see on the screen, we have a few learning objectives in mind that I'm hoping you will experience as we go through the presentation today. So next slide. All right, so as we're talking about pet loss, it is only right that I start by sharing more information about my boys. And so Cheeto is the Tweenie on the bottom left. I lost him in 2019. He was with me 7 out of 10 years of his life. And then there's Scrappy, the mini dachshund, who coincidentally tomorrow is the 2-year mark that I lost him. And so I'm, one of those people who is still going through the grieving process for both, but definitely with Scrappy feeling it. Both losses were hard, but losing Scrappy was extra hard for me. For one, I still had Scrappy after I lost Cheeto. And, so I had him to turn to. And I also had inherited Scrappy from my brother who I had lost in 2007. My brother only had him for 6 months before I inherited him. And as I was putting this presentation together, I had to smile thinking back how I used to joke with my brother saying, ask him, how's my dog doing? It was just something I automatically felt with Scrappy. So then I was lucky enough to have him for, 15 out of 16 and a half of his years. And back when I lost Scrap, there was very minimal support, through friends and family, no shade to anybody because you don't know what you don't know. I had been facilitating traumatic loss support groups with BCBH. And through seeing what a difference the support groups make with people, I had thought, there's got to be something out there for pet loss that I could join. So I had researched high and low. I eventually did find one. However, they did not get back to me for 5 months. And again, no shade there, but I think that really signifies why, it's really important to raise awareness here. Despite people really caring about pets in their physical form, it's clear we still have work to do for post-loss and supporting those who are grieving their losses. And so I'm grateful to be presenting on disenfranchised loss today, in particular as it relates to pet loss support. Next slide. And now I have shared a little bit about my boys, I would like to just invite everybody in the chat who may feel comfortable sharing, if you have had any pet companions, that you would like to honor in the chat. So just feel free to take a moment to honor them in the chat. I see Miso, Gus, Bandit, Laser, Reese, Duchess, Casper, Lily. Oh, wow, there are a lot of you. Oh, that's fantastic. Roxy, Lynx. And many people have multiple pet losses. It's I would say in our support groups, it's not often where people have just experienced one pet loss. Whether it's cats and dogs, multiple cats. It's something that people go through on the regular. Oh, I am so sorry. I see there was the loss yesterday. So as Joshua said, if any of this information becomes like too much to handle, please do take care of yourself. We want to be able to provide information for you that you could benefit from, but at the same time, your well-being is really important as well. So I'm going to let you continue adding names in chat and feel free to honor them in whatever way feels right for you. But in the essence of time, I'm going to head on to the next slide. So before we dig deeper into the presentation, I just wanted to do a brief overview of 3 types of grief that can profoundly impact individuals. So there's complicated grief, or what is now known as prolonged grief disorder in the DSM. And then there's anticipatory grief and disenfranchised grief. So a person could experience one or all of these, and that could be from human loss, or as we are here today, for pet loss. And so just a brief overview of each of these. Prolonged grief disorder, this is when somebody's symptoms last for at least 12 months after the loss, or with children or adolescents, it would be 6 months. And symptoms would be intense yearning for the deceased. The person grieving would be having a lot of difficulty moving forward. And that would be something that they would be under, care with a therapist to have that diagnosis, a therapist or a medical doctor. And then anticipatory grief is related to the feelings and mourning process that a person might experience before the loss actually occurs. And often anticipatory grief occurs in situations when someone or something like a pet is terminally ill. You might hear that often with situations related to cancer. This is when individuals start grieving before the loss actually occurs. And then with disenfranchised loss, this is what we're going to focus on today. It's when somebody is experiencing a loss that is not recognized, validated, or really considered socially acceptable to talk about in society. And so people then often feel isolated or unsupported as they're trying to work through their grieving process. And so again, these can be experienced, but for any type of loss, but we're focusing on pets today. And I just want to take a quick note here to let you know too, that something that was brought to my attention recently that I have to say we haven't been focusing on is how pets are also, so impacted by loss of pets. And so that's something now that I'm also intrigued to focus a little more on. All right, next slide. So what is the difference between disenfranchised grief from disenfranchised loss? So in brief summary, disenfranchised grief is the emotional response to the disenfranchised loss. And through BCBH's Pet Loss Grief Support Group, which I'll share more about in a little bit here, many people have stated that they've experienced many types of losses in their life and have lost humans that have been close to them, but it's often their pets that they have found the hardest to deal with. And this can be because people, society, including workplaces, do not recognize pet loss or accept it in the same way. With bereavement, although we don't quite have the bereavement program, bereavement leave that we would consider acceptable in many places as well. There's no bereavement leave for pets. They are not one of the defined in legislation. So people might not even get time off to work through the mourning, and they might not then even talk about their pets because they have shame, when they may feel shame like when they talk about them. So it's really unfortunate, but that's why, we're here to try to bring awareness to get everybody to talk about it. There are cases where the pet is the only companion that a person had, or just the main companion the person had. You could have 5 people in a house, but that pet is who you relied on. And so after the loss, people have a void to fill. They need to look back at the behaviors that they had before the loss and now adjust to a new way of living. And so, due to these factors, it's important that society as a whole recognizes pet loss so that we can engage in open conversations. And then it just provides more opportunity for people to explore the potential for the grief and mourning process, including things like memorial services. I will say, you'll hear me mentioning the pet loss support group a lot, but I have to say, I have been amazed by some of the tributes and services that people have had for their pets. And in a way, it actually made me feel guilty, quite frankly. One of those grief feelings, because I didn't do it. And I have felt, maybe that's something that I'm still missing. And I do know it's never too late. So that's something that anybody could consider. And then what I would say is one of the most important reasons to acknowledge pet loss is to increase the feelings of connection, and then reduce the feelings of isolation. And so there are a few other points on the screen, but we're just going to head on over to the next slide now. And so you'll continue to hear me talking about BCBH's pet loss support group, but pet loss support as a whole is important. And so what other types of support are there for pet loss? So one might be obvious, thinking of turning to friends and family. Sometimes it can also do the opposite though. If people feel that they aren't supported by friends and family, that's when they might have to look at one of these other supports, one or more of these other supports. Pet owners can be valuable sources of support for people because they know what it's like better than anybody else. That might be somebody you met at the dog park, or at a store, anybody. When it's funny how pets connect us. You don't often just stop and talk to a stranger on the street, but if you both have a dog and you're walking, you have no problem talking to them. Or even if you don't both have a dog, you're somebody who loves pets, you might stop and talk to them. So it's great to have that community. There are many online communities that are great supports too. There are a number of Facebook groups that people do find beneficial, Instagram pages, grief therapists out there. So it's just a matter of finding what works for you there as well. Something else that comes up a lot in our groups is people have found comfort and healing in volunteering, often for pet-related causes. So whether it's rescues, shelters, by giving back, it's helping them in their healing. And then also people like to pet sit. So while they might not be ready to take on ownership again, another dog, another cat, another horse, whatever it might be, they will lend their services, whether it's payment or not, to be able to help others when they need that support. Of course, self-care, it's an integral part of any grieving process. So that's part of the grief support toolbox. And those who may feel that they don't have any outside support, that's where things like BCBH's helpline comes in handy. And then, of course, the support groups that BCBH has. And also, I would like to acknowledge Chilliwack's support group. Theirs usually runs a couple times a year. Theirs is in person and it's in 4 weeks, 4 continuous weeks. You can visit their website for more information on that. And the BCBH one is always held virtually. And I will expand more on that as we go. So next slide. So, why is it important for people to attend pet loss support groups? I mean, I could probably give you 5 pages of reasonings, not only just from my own personal experience, but from the feedback we've received in groups. Um, it really provides a safe place for sharing. People don't often feel like they can talk about their loss with pet loss. And so by providing them with a space that's specific to this type of loss, they're able to foster a sense of community and be with others who understand and can relate to what they're going through. Amazing conversations come out of pet loss support groups. It really helps to validate feelings and normalizes the loss. You might think what you're going through is, just you're really isolated and this is just something you're only experiencing or feeling. But often, if you mention it in a support group, someone else has experienced it too or has felt it as well. And so that can be really validating, which in turn, all of this helps promote healing through the grieving process. And then something that we really like to focus on at BCBH and any of our grief support groups is encouraging continuing the bond after the loss. And so for individuals to honor the life of the pet, whether it was a year, 10 years, you know, appreciate the time you did have and those moments when you're going to have sadness, you might have anger, guilt, everything in between, but those moments that make you smile and feel comfort and maybe like they're with you, that emotional connection that you can continue even when they aren't physically here with you. And, this can be something that with people who are alone, they live alone, maybe they don't have kids, they're seniors, the unhoused, empty nesters, those populations, it's extra important to have pet loss support available to them. And the next slide. All right, and so now I will dig deeper into recognizing the need for support. So you have heard me mention BCBH's Pet Loss Support Group. We started this program November of last year, so we're almost going on a year. And as much as I wanted to offer a program like this just based on my own experiences, I knew that wasn't a justifiable reason to bring that to BCBH. However, we started to notice that we were getting a lot of calls with pet loss on our helpline. And so we pulled the stats and we had an 88% increase from July 2022 to July 2023 in the number of calls we were receiving. And that was without marketing at all. And we had next to no information on our website at that time regarding pet loss. So people were reaching out, just, they wanted that support. They wanted someone on the other line that they could talk to without judgment. And an interesting stat when I was putting this together is that the calls for pet loss have been 5 minutes longer on average than just our regular calls. That's significant. That is quite a difference. And so I can't really confirm why, other than the fact that people may feel like they don't have anybody else to talk to. And so they take advantage in a positive way of that time with a compassionate volunteer who's there just to listen, be with them as they're going through their grief. And so as we launched this almost a year ago, to date, we have hosted 1 online education session and 8 support groups, all online. And that through all of those, we have supported 130 people with an average of 15 people attending the support group. You will see on, I believe it's the next slide, that we have changed our maximum number to 12 participants, and I will explain more of that. As we have gone through the past 10 months, we've been learning along with the participants. And so it's great learning process to see what's working, what isn't. And so we are continuing to evolve. And one thing I want to note on here is the very first pet loss support group that we had, we did ask people to submit photos of the pets that they wanted to honor. And so we will forever have this lovely photo of Not all of the pets honored, not everybody shared one, and that's okay, but we have that memory there. And so to give you some more in-depth detail about the structure of the pet loss support group through BCBH's model, we'll transfer over to the next slide. And so we had started this as a peer support model, and through, again, trial and error, what's working, what isn't, we adjusted that to more of a support group model. And what that means is there's a little more structure, and we also have added in just a little bit of psychoeducational content. And with the psychoeducational content, the purpose is really to bring a subject each time we meet so that that is what the conversation can kind of flow from. And I have to say, this September group that we did with this approach, it went amazingly, and we could have easily gone over our time frame. We've been running these groups for an hour and a half, whether we had 18 people, 12 people, it was always an hour and a half. We did do breakout rooms initially, and we have changed that again based on feedback that we had. People, they felt, you know, okay, we're all connected initially, and then we're disconnected, and so that wasn't really working. And at the same time, you know, to give everybody an opportunity to share and keep it a safe place for everybody, we decided to max it at 12. I will say that even 12, an hour and a half, we definitely could have expanded and gone to 2 hours. So again, we're learning as we go, and the next one, maybe 2 hours. We'll get there eventually, and it'll be the same. For trauma-informed practices, you definitely want consistency, so we're trying to get there. And you'll see on the screen here that an important part of the the support group is that everybody must review and adhere to the guidelines. We're very transparent about the group guidelines. They're not only listed on our website, people are emailed them before the group, and then we also do a brief overview of them as the group starts. Again, keeping safety within the group, and just so that everybody does feel comfortable that they are coming to a safe place to share. And so the model that we have here under the support group model, we have taken aspects of BCBH's traumatic loss support group training. And I'm not too sure, there's probably a number of people who are attending today who have taken that training. And while there isn't pet loss specific content in there, we also don't have, you know, specific content for general grief in there. Like the 8-week model is more traumatic loss based, but we do know that people are able to take a large portion of the content and adjust it to whatever group works for them, whether that's a 4-week group, a drop-in, you know, a homogeneous group, non-homogeneous group. There's just a range. And so there is value in the content that's provided there as well. And so as previously mentioned, you know, we did max the number at 12 now, and within the time frame, you know, it's just something that we want to think about in the future, and we always ask for feedback as well. And so that's something that's really important. And I randomly will get emails with, you know, the positive responses that we get. It is just fantastic. I think that speaks to the safety that people are feeling. And people have also felt that, you know, they may have attended the group months ago, and while they are still on the list, might still want to stay on the list, they're like, you know what? I got what I needed out of those first 3 groups that I attended. I'm good for now, but, you know, keep me on your list. So it's really about opening up conversations and providing that space for everybody together. And so on the next slide, there's a bit more about the model as a whole. So we've got opening and closing practices. It's nothing that we spend a ton of time on, but again, trying to create that trauma-informed space where consistency helps provide that comfort. And so for opening, we might do something like a candle lighting and then do a brief check-in. And for the closing activities, it would be something like, what was an aha moment for today? and then a brief quote, poem, something like that. Um, it's important to note we don't do this in a drop-in format. People do have to pre-register, and again, because we max participants, once we open up registration for the group, once we hit that max, it is what it is. I would love to be able to support more people. Unfortunately, we just aren't able to at this time. And something that I'll expand a little more on here too is prior to our group in September, we offered this as a free program for people to attend. Now, this is not something that BCBH has received any funding for to date. And so, I've just had to be very mindful of that. And therefore, we did implement a small registration fee of $10. And now the next slide. So as we didn't have any funding, I do volunteer my time for the meeting itself. But of course, there's administration that has to happen during the day. Another facilitator, I don't know if I had that on the slide actually. We always do have two facilitators. That's for the safety of the facilitators and the participants. So if a participant needed to have some one-on-one, they could do that with a facilitator. And so I'm not too sure if there's any other executive directors attending this meeting, but as you probably know, zero funding means you probably shouldn't be running a program. It's really hard to justify that, present a case to your board. But, when I'm hearing the difference it's making in people's lives, there was no way I could get rid of it. Whether that meant, okay, we can only offer it every 3 months. I analyzed every possible option. And then that's where, of course, we did ultimately come up with the $10 registration fee after not receiving any support from the sponsorship package we put out. So we sent that out to, and I'm not exaggerating, over 500 individuals and organizations. And while we got great feedback on the program itself and that people wanted to pass that on to their clients, they were unable to contribute. However, there are some other positives that did come out of that. It's not always about the money coming in. I was connected to the executive director from Vancouver Humane Society, Amy Morris. She did give me permission to use her name. That timing was fantastic because she had been working with a team across Canada to develop pet loss programming. And so this was a way to get me involved as well, where, they're definitely the pet experts, and then I'm more of the grief expert. So we met last week now, and we are looking at ways to collaborate on funding proposals so that different programs could be offered across Canada. So stay tuned for that. Hoping that does result in something. And so with the $10 registration fee, I wanted it to be something minimal, that would be reasonable for people, but enough to help cover some of the associated expenses. And to my surprise and appreciation, about half of the people who registered did contribute more than $10. So that was lovely as well. So that will also then help us going forward. I will add, though, aside from the financial side, there's always the human resources as well. You need people to be able to facilitate. With the peer support model, there's not so much of the focus on the structure, but as I mentioned, with BCBH, because the safety and the structure is so important, having at least two facilitators is really important to us. So that's something that we will maintain, at least a minimum of two facilitators throughout. And that means one facilitator, because I'm unpaid for it, that they are paid for it though. So, I wanted to mention something that actually came in last night, again, timely. And this person received the sponsorship package in July. I had sent it out to all of our past and current support group participants, just asking if they know of anybody who may be interested to just please forward it on. no intention of them actually supporting it. But I had a lovely email that somebody said that they provided the package to dog walkers in their area. And although they are not an organization, they would like to support. They had attended our workshop in March, the educational workshop that we put on. And the quote from her was, she said, I've seen what I've seen what a program such as this means to many, including myself, who go through the loss of a dear companion, the loud silence, the emptiness, and the heartache. As an individual, how can I donate? And it's those emails, and I get them fairly regularly. And I have to say, the pet loss, I get way more email correspondence than from any of our support groups with feedback like this. So it really warms the heart and keeps you going. And now the next slide. So I'm assuming within attendees today, we have various backgrounds, might be grief professionals, hospice workers, people who are attending because you've been impacted by pet loss yourself. So how, as a community, can we build more support and awareness for pet loss? So one of the first things we can do is just talk about it, normalize it, validate it, talk about it as if it were any other form of loss. Give people time to express themselves, give them time to go through the mourning process. Too often you hear they were just a pet, or you only had them 3 years, or whatever it is. You have another dog. When people say you have another dog, another cat, well, how can that take away the time that you had spent with this other precious being? And so other ways that you can do support outside of just talking on a day-to-day basis is providing one-on-one support when possible. Whether it's a friend or someone that you're just randomly talking to, again, normalizing it and being able to allow them that time to process it. It could be one-on-one support also professionally, and that could mean counseling. I definitely would recommend, if it's through counseling, that they try to find a pet loss or at least grief more specific therapist, because I have had feedback from participants in our group who really haven't had a great experience with therapists who might not have a connection to grief and or pet loss. And something else that's really simple that people can do, especially if you are an organization that wants to help but you don't have the resources to provide support, would be to just have resources available. So what does that look like? That could be links to websites, brochures, BCBH's helpline phone number handy, so that there is an option. There's somewhere for somebody to go when they're going through this. And people can also volunteer, whether that is through volunteering for something like facilitating a group. Maybe in time we'll see something like one-on-one peer support. There are many ways that people could get involved. Volunteering at humane societies, that's something that we will likely build onto at BCBH, because there's so many deaths that people experience, through those organizations. And again, tying that into the pets who need to be supported as well as they experience loss. And then, of course, if you're in a position where you would like to host support groups or, co-facilitate, whatever it might be, so just take some relevant training. That might be attending something like BCBH's traumatic loss facilitation training, or there's a number of other ones online. Some are legit, some aren't, so just be careful with what you're looking for there. I will reiterate, the BCBH one, there's not pet loss specific content in there as of yet. Maybe we could add some of that in there, but the learnings in there definitely set a person up to be able to start offering pet loss services pretty much immediately. And the next slide. So now, as we have just talked about supports, this page just lists some of the resources that we use internally. The book here from Alan Wolfelt is really nice. It provides some educational content, but then there's also opportunity to journal in there and share different experiences with your pet, share your feelings in there. It's a very nice, like nice, thin, small book. You can get it on Amazon. And these are just a few of the resources. Of course, there are many others out there. And then on the last slide, this is the BCBH information. So at a minimum, if you don't directly provide pet loss support, I would encourage you to take down the BCBH helpline number. We're open Monday to Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. And we've got volunteers who are there to listen to anybody who wants to talk about their loss. And I believe that information will be sent out to all attendees, the resources. Correct, Joshua? Yes. Okay. All right. So thank you all. I will now pass it back over to Joshua.
Okay, well, thank you, Pam, for that presentation. And it's really great to see that you're there to support people and the increase of individuals calling into the center and getting the support. It warms my heart that there are places that are starting to sort of offer this kind of support. And so we did have a question quickly. It was, can I share how to access the virtual support with any clients? So I guess that anyone can go. There's no limitations to that.
Right now, it is restricted to people in BC. So if it's somebody outside of BC, I would ask that they don't register. The one thing is, like, I'm to the point where I would love to tell the world to, attend these groups, but it could also be discouraging then if we can't provide, the support. If 25 people want to register and we can only allow 12, but definitely send them because even though we have 125 people who have done the pre-registration, somehow it seems that we are always right around our maximum, we've kind of ranged from about 9 to 18 within the groups. So yeah, people will likely get in because there are people who want to stay on the list. They've maybe attended in the past. They want to take a break or, they may or may not come back in the future. So.
Okay, well, that's good to know. And so, yeah, thanks again for presenting that and the work you're doing. And so now it's my pleasure to bring up Paris here to really talk to us about that lived experience. I know, Pam, you've talked a little bit about your own, and I'm really curious to hear what Paris has to say. And so if you could first, I guess, talk about your relationship with your animal and what that meant to you as I don't know, a pet owner or companion. I don't know what you like to call yourself.
Okay. Well, thank you. And it's I'm really touched that I was asked to do this. I met Pam and attended the BCBH's pet loss workshop last year. I missed the first one, but I attended after that, and it really has been life-changing for me. I have lost a total of 4 pets. The reason I originally reached out was I lost one traumatically, and I'm willing to talk about that, but I'll wait, Joshua, for you to specifically ask me about that. But I lost one traumatically, and really wanted to focus on that. What I found in doing this work, though, is that I haven't really even grieved the ones that died non-tragically. Like for me, I'm closer. I'm not married or in a relationship with a person or whatever. The animals are my closest companions and even more than family. And so when a pet would die, I just kind of like did my best and moved on. But this attending the BCBH's session not only helped with the one traumatic event, but other ones as well. But there's a bit in Pam's presentation there is that, like, I don't think I have a unique relationship with my animal and with my animals, but I have a different relationship that other people may have, right? I remember a guy that he was also a single guy who was with his dog all the time, but he said, she was near the end of his life, and he said, she's just a dog. And I know that that's some people's relationship with them, but that's not mine. And so that's what has made this grief process so difficult for me until I found out some resources, is that it wasn't just a dog for me. It was like one of my closest friends, and I miss her. So hope that answers the question you asked.
It does, and it just sort of showcases that love that you have for the animal and how important they all are to you. And I think it was just an important point that you said that as much as you went in talking about Lily, the of the most recent loss, you realize there's all those other losses that were behind it that was never really acknowledged to the extent that Lily is being right now. And so I guess could you talk a little about just your own grief journey? I know you talked a little bit about going to the support system, but could you expand on that a little bit more and like what you felt and where you're
Yeah,
at
no,
now?
I'm definitely happy to do that. So uh, I'll just back up to take just a couple minutes to. So I originally I was living in Courtenay at the time. I think there's a lot of people that are not from BC. I live in Victoria, which is the south end of Vancouver Island. At the time, I was living mid-island on Vancouver Island in Courtenay, and I used to do volunteer work, volunteer dog walking with the SPCA in Comox, and they had this pit bull boxer come in named Lily. And there's a unique thing about the SPCA there, is that their kennel, it's in a round format. So the kennels look at each other. And so some dogs do not do well in that kind of an environment. And Lily was one of them. She was really, she had a lot of anxiety and stuff. So they asked if so I was dog walking for them. They asked if I would take her in as a foster. And I think that's always a trick, because I think that most of the time when they come in as fosters, a lot of the time they end up staying with the fostering. But anyway, but I took her in as a foster. And then on July 1st, on Canada Day, 2012, I adopted her. And so she lived with me in Courtenay, and then we moved back to Victoria. And then on November 19th of 2018, she was hit by a car out front of my house. I won't talk a lot about the details of that, but just to tell you, I do some dog sitting as well, and I had picked up another dog who was going to be staying with us. And I was really concerned about him, making sure he didn't get out of the truck and get onto the road or whatever. So I was just really focused on making sure he got in the house. And I don't know, I still to this day can't remember if I left the truck door open or whether Lily had gotten by me. She wouldn't run after people or other dogs, but if there was a squirrel or some kind of wildlife, she might. So I don't know how she got by me, but I let the one dog in the house, and then I came out and she had been hit by a car, and took her to the vet. The vet determined very quickly she wasn't going to make it, and so then she was euthanized. So that was November 8th of 2018. And I want to say I don't feel like I'm afraid of grief. I didn't go out of my way to try to compartmentalize this event and just like not deal with it. I just think it was too much for me on my own. What I've come to learn is it was just too much for me on my own. So I don't think I tried to avoid the grief, but so that happened November 19th of 2018. And so November 19th of 2023 was the fifth year anniversary of that death. And I realized that I'm not any different 5 years later than I was on day one, as far as the effect that it has on me. Not only the loss of Lily, who was just such a loving soul. I've had lots of dogs. They don't all have good dispositions. I wish they did. But she really did, and she was great with all animals, and my dogs all give me something special, and she just gave me something irreplaceable as well. And so I come up to the 5th year anniversary, and I just realized I'm just no better. I had done some EMDR therapy. Whether I didn't stick with it long enough, or for whatever reason, I didn't feel like it had a whole lot of difference. So anyway, at the 5 year mark, I just kind of thought I want to try and find something so that I don't have to always have this same experience with her loss. Obviously, the date of her loss is always going to be heavy, but it was like 365 days a year. I feel the same thing, right? I'm unable to enjoy her life because I'm stuck in her death, you know? And so, I just started Googling stuff and found BCBH. And I had missed the first session, but I emailed BCBH, and Pam referred to it taking 5 months for somebody to get back to her. BCBH got back to me right away and said we had just started. We just had our first meeting, but here's the information for the next meeting. And then I attended the rest of the meetings until they took a break for the summer. And so, I mean, just a night and day experience. At that first meeting, I talked about, I have an iPhone, and it may be the same on Android, but on iPhone sends you picture memories sometimes, and sometimes Lily would come up, right? And I couldn't even look at it. I still have a lot of guilt about, the fact that she was hit by a car. And it was a bit in Pam's presentation too about, like, even my mom, who obviously she loves me and she keeps telling me I got to get over it. And, if this was a child, people wouldn't tell you to get over it. They would have more compassion and empathy. They wouldn't say things like, yeah, but you have a daughter. Who cares about your son, or whatever the case is, right? But with pet loss, and I don't even blame people, it's because they don't have the same relationship with them, right? So anyway, I say all that because, like, really loving people that love me and want to see me move through it just weren't being helpful. And I wasn't able to find a process, work through it on my own, even though I tried with a counselor and with some EMDR therapy. So, but getting connected with BCBH, having people that, the shared experience, some with events that are, like, more tragic than mine and less tragic than mine. That the trauma in the event isn't really that important. Although some of us that, like, have some guilt that others don't have, it's good to kind of share that some experience. But the main thing is the shared experience of just the pet loss, particularly for those that had that kind of bond with their animals that just is kind of irreplaceable, that we just can't get another dog and stuff like that. So I'm quite sure. So, November 19th, a couple months from now, I'll be celebrating the 6-year anniversary, and I'm better. I'm not great. Like, there's some days I'm better than others, but I give an example is that there's a mountain on Vancouver Island called Mount Washington, and we used to spend the summers there walking around on the mountain. And I hadn't been able to go back I went back to the mountain once after her death, and it was just a really bad experience for me. And I didn't feel like I was ever going to be able to go back again. And this summer, with some different dogs, not only was I able to go back there, but there's this one particular place where her and one of my other dogs used to like to run around, and I was able to go back there and let Brody and some other dogs walk around with him. So again, like, sorry, I can be long-winded at times, but I just want to say, I mean, there's such a stark contrast between what I could accomplish on my own, doing the best I could, and the benefit I've got by being with some other people with some shared experiences. It's like that. I've heard that, expression, shared sorrow, half sorrow. And when it's a group of many more than that, it just, was that much more beneficial to me. So anyway, I hope that answered your question, Joshua. And that's my experience with grief around Lily.
Yeah, no, it definitely did. And you brought up a lot of, like, different concepts. But what I really want to sort of, I guess, point out is that something changed, because you're able to get the support, and the support that it was, you changed and you're able to do something different now with your animals and honor Lily in a different way. And I think that's just beautiful. Like, for me, seeing change because of programs and people and the kindness of others that, we're not stuck in grief, right? We can really work through it given the opportunities. And I'm really happy that there was support for you when you did look. Did you ever look like before the 5 years? Or was this like the
No,
first time there was like a calling to look?
well, yeah, I had a couple of different therapists, and Pam brought up in her presentation about, some of us seek therapy and it just isn't really that successful. So I had different therapists that I had worked with just in my, personal life. And almost exactly what Pam said, I don't think that there was anything wrong with them other than they weren't experts in that. And then EMDR, I went in because I'd heard some other people talking about EMDR. I just thought that was going to be the natural solution for me. And maybe it's just that I just don't relate well to EMDR, but that wasn't the answer. So I did try some other things. But the connection with other people that have been through a similar experience was the difference.
Wow. And I think it's really good to know because a lot of times we do say like therapy, go to therapy, but it only works for a certain amount of people and for a certain type of need. But this is you really want to be around other people who are also grieving a loss and a loss of an animal. And so I think it's really beautiful that you found that and you're finding your way through, right? Grief is very difficult and we're just learning as we go. But I'm glad hopefully you're feeling more hopeful that things are changing as you sort of move forward and process it in different ways. And so I just want to actually see if there's anyone in the audience that has a question for either Pam or Paris about their journey.
I just want to make one comment about what you just said too, and that's that having been through the experience of like if I ever went back, and I may go back because there's some other deaths that my other animals' deaths that I haven't processed, I would definitely seek someone that is a grief therapist for sure, at least that, but also has experience with pet loss grief. Now, the flip side of that is it's in my area, it's harder to find than I thought it was going to be. There was nobody in Victoria, and now that I'm thinking back on it, that's one of the then I was able to find BCBH, and that certainly filled that role. But a regular therapist that's not a grief specialist, wasn't going to work for me. So I thought that was an important point in Pam's presentation. So thank you.
That's very true. And it's a lot of, I guess, therapists aren't trained in grief support and let alone pet loss support. So it's a really great reminder as we sort of move forward. And I guess now with the virtual supports, we can go beyond BC now to sort of see if there are other therapists out there that have that kind of training. And so if anyone has any questions for either Pam or Paris, you can either raise your hand or put them in the chat. A lot of people sort of just thanking you and saying much appreciated.
It looks like Andrew's hand is up.
Oh, okay, yeah. Andrew?
Yes, thank you. Thanks so much. Paris, really appreciate what you shared. And Pam, thank you so much for the presentation. And of course, Joshua for facilitating as well. Quick question, Pam, it's really for you. You talked about the facilitator training earlier. It got me really interested. And I did quickly pop on your website, although I didn't spend too much time on there because I was trying to watch the presentation. But I couldn't find any information about that training. I wondered if is that freely available, just so I can have a look and see what it includes.
Yes, I can post the link in the chat. I will note we have one coming up in October. There's only 2 spots left. We do them quite regularly though. And so if you don't get in on that October one, we will have probably not this year, but early 2025 for sure.
Good, that's great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
The reason my hand's up, I just wanted to add, I've taken the BCBH's traumatic loss facilitator training. Once I got involved with being a participant in the pet loss group, I wanted an opportunity to give back, and so I took that program. It's an unbelievable program, and I mean I could spend another half hour talking about that. I won't, but I'm just saying like I knew that I could do this for pet loss, but taking that traumatic loss facilitator training program also got me to see that the skills are very transferable to other types of loss and grief as well. But I was just blown away at what a great great program that is. And if you have the opportunity to take it, I know that you won't regret it. So thank you.
I just want to note, somebody had asked a great question here. Is the helpline available for those throughout Canada? It is. We even get people calling throughout the world. So, of course, the majority are BC, but for sure, you can pass that on.
Excellent. Okay, so I can't believe the hour already went by so fast. I could have talked to both of you some more. I know there were some more questions that would come in. But once again, just thank you both for being here and sharing your time and allowing us to hear more about your pets, but also your programming and the impact it's had on you and also the people around. So that really opened my heart, and I'm glad there's people like this. I'm glad people are being supported through this. And so as we sort of move to end this, we just hope you enjoyed the session, and we ask that you complete a short survey at the end of this. And so the next registration is going to be it's called The Next Day, What Happens After Someone Dies, and that's scheduled for October 24th at noon. And to be notified of any other sessions, you can subscribe to our newsletter. And so we hope to provide you a copy of this presentation, a recording, and also the summary notes in about 7 working days. So just watch your email for that. So once again, thank you for joining us today. It's always great to sort of see so many people interested in the grief and bereavement literacy and also this topic itself. So I hope you have a good rest of the day, and we'll hopefully see you back next month.
Thank you, Joshua, for having me again, and thank you all for being here.
Thanks for inviting me.
Take care, Paris.
Thank you.